what I tell all my residents is there are 3 A's to being successful: available, affable, and able. And I was always available, tried to be nice, and was able.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. And don't forget that CME credit is available when you listen with us. Just look for CMify in the show notes to learn how. My guest today is a very old friend of mine and a former partner in my surgical practice in Montgomery, Alabama. Our paths diverged several years ago, and now he finds himself involved in surgical education with the Northeast Georgia Hospital System General Surgery Residency Program. So let's hear my conversation with Dr. Ed Foxhall. It's a real pleasure for me today because I get to talk to not only a really capable and successful physician, but I get to talk to an old friend of mine, a former partner, Dr. Ed Foxall, who has a really interesting story. And Ed, it's good to talk to you again. Thank you for coming.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, and I'm looking forward to it. And it's always good to catch up.
It is indeed. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. You got such an interesting story, I think. Let's get right down to it. As we always do, we like to start at the beginning. So let's do that. You spent your early life in West Texas, Memphis, I believe it was. Is that right?
That's correct.
Looks like you were a pretty good student. Dean's Lister, off to the University of Texas in Austin. At that point in your life, did you feel pretty sure you were headed for medical school, or did that happen later?
That's what I wanted to do. Starting off in Memphis, I wanted a summer job where I didn't have to build fence and chase cattle.
Yeah.
So I asked my dad, and he said, well, I hear the hospital is looking for orderlies, and they have air conditioning. And so I thought, well, that sounds like a great job. So I signed up for that, and that's how it got started. I started off as an orderly on the floor, and then showed some interest in the lab and learned how to look through a microscope. And then they caught me looking in the operating room and asked me if I wanted to come in there. And that's how it got started. And so then I thought, well, I think I would like to do this.
So prior to that, you hadn't really had any particular thoughts about what your long-term career was going to be?
Well, I wanted to be a professional golfer, but that dream got squashed pretty quick.
Yeah.
But, and my mother was a CRNA and was chief of nurse anesthesia at Charity Hospital in New Orleans.
Wow.
And so and my dad's best friend was the local family doctor who also was a good surgeon. That was my first exposure. That's how I got here.
What really interests me at this point is that you really were a good student in undergrad, Dean's Lister, honors graduate, so forth and so on, all the things that you would expect. And yet you were unable to get accepted, at least on that application, to medical schools in the U.S.
That's correct.
You got any ideas about what brought that on? I mean, you had to have been fabulous in the interview. You're just a great conversationalist. So I'm curious, when a Dean's List student comes in and makes application at medical school, I would think that they would be right on top of that.
I think I was an average candidate, and that was a very popular thing to do at that point in time. Everybody was applying to medical school. Mm-hmm. You know, my MCAT score was above average, but not spectacular. Yeah. And I think maybe if I'd have pursued it 2 or 3 more times, I probably could have gotten in, but you didn't, and that's really fascinating to me. Again, I went through the same experience of having been rejected on my first application, and I just turned right around and restarted the application process, made sure I knew everybody on the faculty, tried to make connections and things of that nature. That was my strategy. But you decided to take another type of course. So tell us about that. Well, I wanted to go ahead and get on with my career. So I applied to the medical school in Guadalajara. As it turned out at that time, was one of the largest American medical schools in the world. The more Americans going there.
I didn't know that.
I applied, got in, and drove to Guadalajara not knowing a soul. Literally got down there, and you had to take 6 weeks of intensive Spanish, and then you had to enroll in college and pass Mexican government, geography, and history.
Wow.
And so I did all that, and all of the classes were 100% in Spanish. And so it was...
Did you find that challenging?
It was challenging, but essentially the way the Americans would study in medical school there is we would study English textbooks, and you would, 10 days before the test, switch over and learn all the Spanish words for what you had learned.
So you had a peer group of English speakers, and I can see how that would have made a huge difference.
Right. And I found it interesting that the Americans or English speakers were the top 10% of the class year in and year out.
That is interesting.
It's interesting that everybody in my class is extremely successful today. All of my friends that I graduated with there were all extremely successful, and these are highly motivated individuals.
Yeah, I would imagine. Just the very fact that they elected to study in a challenging environment says a lot to their determination and yours, for that matter. We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but first, I'd like to share a message from Navigate. You know, after spending years in the financial sector, Navigate has met lots of clients with all kinds of student loan issues. They were confused, they were overwhelmed by the doublespeak and the overly complex forms, and especially the deliberately misleading statements from loan servicer representatives. Navigate recognized the chaos in the student loan industry and immediately brought clarity and real solutions. If you'd like to flip the script on student debt, visit www.flipthescript.loan/MD-coaches to schedule a call with Navigate. They'll tailor a plan specifically for your unique situation and work with you until the loan is paid off. What do you have to lose besides the stress of student loan debt?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
When you got underway, when you were in the surgical training part of your career, did you feel right away that, this is it, I've done the right thing, and no doubt now, no looking back, I had really found my place, or not?
That's exactly what I thought. I'd never been happier. That's what I wanted to do. At one point, I thought I wanted to do heart surgery, but then I couldn't see myself doing the same operation day in and day out.
Right.
And that's what I liked about general surgery. And
that was exactly my attitude.
Still like it today.
I can't imagine operating on the same organ day after day after day for 30 or 40 years.
And so, but that's how I ended up. And I actually wanted to do vascular and was accepted to Baylor's vascular fellowship program. Ended up calling them up and say, I just can't make it. We had two chiefs, an administrative chief and a trauma chief. And I was the trauma chief the second half of the year. And I was so burned out. The fellowship at Baylor was 2 years. And this was Michael DeBakey's program. Crawford's program, but Michael DeBakey was there. Right. And I was told that there are no days off. There's no vacation. And I just didn't think I could take it. And so I said, thank you, but no thank you.
That's an interesting subject, and I want to talk some more about that later when we get into what you're doing right now. But I'm going to move us along just a little bit. You did finish your residency and decided at that point to get yourself back to Texas. Is that right?
I did. I went back as close to my hometown as I could.
And was that the idea, trying to be near home?
Yes.
Okay.
My little hometown, that hospital closed, as happens in small towns. And the closest one was 30 miles away. And I was the only surgeon. And they had family practice doctors that would still operate.
Right.
After about a year of that, one night they called and said, asked me to come help do an appendectomy with this family practitioner. I said, well, I'll come do it and you can help me. He said, no, I just didn't want to wake up my partner. So the next phone call is to my wife, who's a CRNA, and she had to get out of bed and go in and do the appendectomy. And that was my sign that it was time to look around and find something else. Yeah. It just wasn't going to work out. I got there. I set up all their enteral nutrition formulas, their TPN. They had never heard or seen any of anything like that.
I think people are largely surprised to find out that people with no residency training at all were doing a lot of surgery back in those days. And it was really not that long ago, but they certainly were. I think that's all but disappeared nowadays. But so it was. It sounds like it was largely a business-related decision that made you decided that you wanted to go.
Well, I just wasn't happy. I could certainly make a living there, and they had paid me a stipend while I was a resident my last 2 years, but which I had to pay back when I left.
Yeah, I got you.
But it was that was not the surgeon that I wanted to be.
I got you. Nor the surgeon that you became, which we'll talk about some more later. So you had to get out of that particular practice, and it wouldn't have surprised me a bit to find that you had relocated someplace in Texas, but you wound up in Montgomery, Alabama. Got to be a story there.
Well, Terry Treadwell is from small to Eastland, Texas, just outside of Abilene. He had some friends in Texas that heard I was looking, and it was literally a cold call. He called me and introduced himself and said,
so you were recruited.
Well, he said, you ought to at least come look at this before you look at anything else. He said, Montgomery's a really nice place to live. Went and looked at it. I liked it. I liked the climate. I liked everything about it. It was, there are, real surgeons there, and I could have some partners to ask questions to. And so it seemed like a good idea at the time.
And once you arrived there, did you feel pretty good about it?
Start off, I did really well. I like everything about it.
And you were certainly well received by the community, which I know from my personal experience. And it was, a year, maybe 2 years, I guess, before I joined the group.
Right.
And we had a pretty good run there, didn't we?
We did.
Until we got fired.
Exactly.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just kind of went into the office one day and was told, get my stuff, that the Central Alabama Surgical Associates was no longer in existence.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you and I went through that simultaneously, and interestingly, the recovery was not particularly difficult. And I would like to hear you talk a little bit about how you approached that. You and I sort of went about it differently, but that's a significant issue when you don't have any contractual guarantees or assurances that your position in a group is guaranteed. Suddenly you found yourself having to make some decisions. So how did you approach it at that point?
Well, essentially I was fired and I didn't want to leave. I had a good practice. I enjoyed what I was doing. And I looked around. I wanted access to both Jackson and the Baptist hospitals in Montgomery. And I found a place directly across from the cancer center and a little office there. And so I got that opened up and then went over to the cancer center and told them that, I'm available if there's somebody from out of town that needs something done. They can walk right across the street. I can see them, and I'll take care of whatever your needs are. And that proved to be a very fortunate thing to do. They were able to keep my doors open by sending me patients and being available. What I tell all my residents is there are 3 A's to being successful: available, affable, and able. And I was always available, tried to be nice, and was able. So it was that's sort of how I ended up going there.
I think that's a really important part of the story, because I think practically any community that you go into as a specialist practitioner, all the specialists are going to tell you, we're oversaturated. We've got too many of whatever specialist you are, and you're probably not going to survive here. But it turns out that if you're nice to people and make yourself available, that it responds and pays off very well, wouldn't you say?
Without a doubt. That's my advice to any young surgeon is make friends with the emergency room doctor. And it's amazing how many times the person on call they don't particularly like, and someone has appendicitis, they'll give you a call, or whenever you're walking out to the parking lot, you walk through the emergency room. If you're willing to work, the business is there.
You be nice to them and they'll be nice to you, right?
Exactly.
Well, Ed, I want to get into one other thing that I think is really important. to talk about and sort of advertise a little bit, and that is that you had some additional problems with examinations, and in much the same way that making application to medical school, and for whatever reason, we're not able to get the attention of schools in the United States, elected to have to go someplace else. But passing the specialization examination for the American Board of Surgery is about as challenging as anything anybody ever faces. And you did have your issues with that, and I'd really like for you to tell us the story and how you approached it.
The qualifying exam or the written exam wasn't the problem. It was the certification exam, and it's an oral board exam.
Exactly. It's a different kind of test entirely, isn't it?
It's very anxiety producing. You can easily be intimidated by these big names that write the textbooks that are giving you the exam. Well, I had trouble passing that, so I thought I would talk to UAB and take a year and see if I couldn't figure out what my problem is.
UAB being the University of Alabama in Birmingham.
Correct.
Okay.
And I just walked right up to the chairman of the department and introduced myself, explained the situation. And he thought it was an interesting story. And he said, we'd love to have you. And he set up like a fellowship year or like being a super resident or something like that. I spent a year there and made some of the best friends of my life, to the point that I still play golf with every one of these guys I met there once a year. It has proved to really help me now in the position that I am in today. But there is no doubt in my mind that if I had not spent that year, I would not be board certified today.
And my impression of that experience, as I learned it from our conversations back in those days, is that although you were serving in the position of a trainee, you were so capable and so knowledgeable and such an asset to the program that they used you as much in the capacity of a faculty member as they did a trainee. Am I stretching the truth there, or is that the way it was?
That's exactly the way it was. The trauma attendings enjoyed when I was on call. They wouldn't have to get out of bed and things like that. And I actually had one of the residents who was at the VA call me, and he was doing a open right colectomy at the VA, and the attending was doing something else, and I talked him through it over the phone.
That's impressive.
But it was embarrassing, but I swallowed my pride, became board certified, and turned out to be one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Kind of like going to medical school in Guadalajara.
Yeah.
One of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Well, UAB is certainly renowned for the quality of its surgery program, and to be there and make friends with those faculty members, in addition to the other residents, I'm sure was something that you continue to treasure, and you have certainly made the best of it. So it's a great part of your story.
Sort of made me want to, when I came back to Montgomery, my practice sort of moved over to Baptist, and Sam Saliba came to me and wanted to see if I would be willing to have a family practice resident with me.
Uh-huh.
Well, after being around the surgery residents, sure, that'd be fine. And it was interesting I sort of let them design their own program. If they wanted to learn how to operate, I would do my best to tell them. But if they just wanted to do preoperative evaluations and postoperative care, that was good also. If they wanted to learn endoscopy, I would do the best I could to teach them. But that's sort of my first step into academic medicine or whatever.
And that's exactly where I want to go now. At some point, you made the decision that it was time to get out of Montgomery, Alabama, and go someplace else. And I'm interested to know how that decision came about and where you wound up.
Well, my beautiful practice of taking care of little blue-haired ladies morphed into trauma critical care and drugs and thugs. So I found myself
Baptist being the only trauma center within like 100 miles. Yeah.
One night after, I think we did a good job and we were doing a good service, but it was getting to be pretty onerous to take call. And on the weekends, I would round on anywhere between 60 and 75 patients because we would cover for several other surgeons that were, off. Well, one Friday night, I had 7 people all shot come in the ER.
That's a big day.
And I started operating on Friday and finished Monday night. At that point, I guess I'm about 50, something like that. Yeah. And so I came home and I told Barbara, I said, baby, I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. And it wasn't 2 days till I got a call from Gainesville, Georgia.
Unsolicited.
Just kind of like Terry Treadwell calling me.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, one of my friends that I was resident with in Philadelphia came down here and tried it and didn't like it, but left on good terms. And they asked him, is there anybody, that you think might want to, come do this job? And they were looking for a surgical hospitalist. Mm-hmm. And so he said, the only one I know is Foxhall, and he's in Montgomery, and he's the only one I know that lives in the South. So that's how they got my name. I came over here and looked at it. I didn't like the practice pattern of just being in the hospital, taking call, and not having a private practice or anything like that. So I said thanks, but no thanks. And about 2 months after that, they called me and offered me a job. One of their partners had moved on, and the rest is history.
It sounds like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that that was a pretty easy decision for you at that point. Is that correct?
No, because I'm leaving a very lucrative practice.
Right, and that's there was no doubt about that. So it wasn't so much that you were dying to get out of there because there was nothing to do and you couldn't pay the rent, but the exhaustion must have been substantial.
That's exactly right. That's what was taking its toll. And I had also had to have one of my hips replaced just from standing on it and playing golf all these years. So I had to have a hip replacement. I'm thinking I just have to do something. And but I came over here. I liked Gainesville, Georgia. And the best part about it is there was no trauma. Whatever trauma happened around here, they put it in a helicopter and flew it right over Gainesville to Grady. That soon changed also.
That is, that's quite a setup. So it's not like you don't deal with surgical emergencies, but there's no more of that. Everyone that comes in is a multi-system problem, and you're going to be awake for days. It's a little bit more like that's a little bit more civilized, I guess.
When I came here, I applied for ICU privileges, and they said because I hadn't done a fellowship, I couldn't have ICU privileges, that it was a closed unit, and then if I operate on them, I put them in there, and the ICU specialist would take care of them. And I said, oh, gosh, that's just terrible. And so I'm thinking, gosh, this place is too good to be true, and as it turns out, it was. The hospital decided that they wanted to start doing trauma, and they hired a specialist, so we all took trauma call again. And then that surgeon moved on, and another trauma director moved in and was interested in starting a general surgery residency program, and that's how it all got started.
Well, that's exactly where I wanted to go next. You have also morphed into a professorship. You are the associate program director for the general surgery residency. Did you ever dream back when you were in medical school in Guadalajara that someday you would have a position like that where you were overseeing a bunch of people that were going to be facing the same boards that you struggled with? Back in the day?
It never even occurred, didn't even think about it. As it turned out, my roommate in Guadalajara was the chief of gastroenterology at Medical University of South Carolina and trained one of the gastroenterologists that's here. So I think that's interesting that we both ended up in academics.
And you have, unlike a lot of surgeons and other practitioners, I think this happens in every specialty. There are a lot of people who finish their postgraduate training, they get their boards, and they go to work, and they continue to do things in exactly the way they did the day they left their residency or their fellowship. But you have actually embraced every new technology that came along and have made the switch over to minimally invasive surgery, which is not, that's not a simple task, but you really have changed with the times and quite successfully. You want to comment on that?
I will give Frank Jackson, who was a surgeon at Jackson Hospital, for which it was named after. When I first got there, he was in the twilight of his practice, and he was helping me do a case. And I asked him, kind of what kept him going. And he said, try to learn something new every year. Always embrace change and keep up with the times. And he told me that, gosh, it's close to 30 years ago now. And I've sort of taken his advice and, I've sort of moved along. And this is a pretty sophisticated medical center. And so everything was done minimally invasive. So I worked on improving my laparoscopic skills. And then in the days of the robot, everything's moving that way. I just think you need to keep up. And I think the best thing is being associated with this training program and with the residents. They keep me young,
but they do.
Moving forward and things like that. And so I want to learn something new so I can have them exposed to it.
He was a wise man. Ed, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Not only is it an interesting story, but it's good to catch up with you. Obviously, we don't see each other like we once did when we lived in the same city, but I want to thank you for taking the time to have the conversation with me today. That being said, at this point, I want to get into what I consider the most important part of the program, and that's where I get out of the way and let you speak to our audience on your own. So that's what we'll do right now. Here is Dr. Ed Foxall to give us his personal prescriptions for success.
Well, thank you, Randy. I've really enjoyed this and getting to catch up. And I think the only prescription for success would be don't be afraid of change. I have had to change my plans several times in my career. And I think people get frozen, get so worried about change. I've changed the locations. I've changed everything. That's just part of it. And I always suggest to younger people that if you're doing this for the money, there's much better ways to make money. I measure my wealth in how many friends I have. And that started a lot in Guadalajara. To this day, that's how I think I have been successful, is I have so many smart friends. And I would encourage everybody it's okay to make a change. And wherever you go, make a new friend. Those are prescriptions that have helped me be successful. And that's what I would offer to anyone else.
Well, you have certainly made the best of it, Ed. I have treasured the time that I got to practice with you when you were still in Alabama, and I'm Very proud of the successes that you have had since you moved on to Georgia. And I really thank you for taking the time to be with us today. People are going to enjoy hearing your story, and I think they'll find it inspiring. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find you and anything that you want to sell, whether it be podcast or if you're writing a book or whatever, email addresses, anything that you'd like to share. Go ahead.
No, I have no disclosures. My email address is enfoxall@gmail.com. That is the one email that I look at every day and will answer. We do have a very strong general surgery residency program here. We are interested in training what I call community academic surgeons. We do a lot of research here, and we have 6 residents at each level, so it's a pretty big program. And it's a Northeast Georgia Medical Center general surgery residency program. And I would encourage anybody that's interested to reach out to me.
Dr. Ed Foxhall, thank you so much for being with us today on Prescriptions for Success.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed the show, you can help us reach more listeners by leaving a rating and a review, especially on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if your app doesn't have that option, just leave us an email or a voicemail through SpeakPipe at www.mymdcoaches.com/podcast. You can also help by becoming a Patreon member. That link is in the show notes. And we hope you'll also follow our companion podcast, Life-Changing Moments with Dr. Dale Waxman. Special thanks to our producer, Craig Clausen, our promotions manager, Mariana Rodabaugh, and to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.